All right. What a year it's been. 2020, huh? Kicking the ass for some. Pause for reflection to others. That being said, here on the channel, we've never done one of these, you understand. But, subscriber base has grown a bit. So I thought it would be prudent to do the inaugural Ring IQ Year-End Award. That's right. And we're going to start this off with Ring IQ's Prospect of the Year. Men's and women's prospects of the year. And, this award really goes out to the prospect that has managed to get the most done while exhibiting the ceiling, exhibiting the talent that in the coming year, they're definitely somebody to watch out for. And we're going to let the ladies kick this one off. I had a lot of girls in mind when it came to this award. There's a lot of up-and-comers that show a lot of promise, that show a lot of talent. Ebony Bridges, Shanika Johnson, Rachel Ball, Shannon Courtney.
Lacey Babcock is pretty good too.
She is, as is Tiara Brown, as is Kim Clavel, many others, but we can't lose sight of the context here. We are talking about the year of 2020, and what prospect really caught my eye this year? What prospect managed to get things done in a very difficult time, COVID times, in 2020? And with that being said, that governing criteria for this particular award, I want to kick it off by awarding Melissa Odessa from right here in the US of A, the Ring IQ Award for Prospect of the Year. That's right, Melissa Odessa managed to squeeze in 3 fights. She managed to go 3-0 in her professional record this year. This is a fighter that exhibits a lot of promise, a lot of talent, good amateur background, well-spoken, well-voiced, easy on the ice, all the good stuff. Very marketable fighter. Managed by the Havoc Advisory, helmed by Andre Rosier, trainer to many solid fighters in the sport of boxing, in partnership with MTK Global. They got a nice little thing going on. They're in bed with each other. And, Melissa's just a promising fighter. I actually got the opportunity to interview Melissa here on the channel, and I think she's got what it takes. She is this year's recipient of the inaugural Ring IQ Prospect of the Year Award. We turn over to men's boxing, and the men's prospect of the year, the recipient of this award, much like the women's prospect of the year, there's a lot of guys that might come to mind. Maybe Josh Kelly comes to mind. Maybe it's Jared Ennis. Maybe it's Chris Colbert. Could be a lot of different guys depending on who you ask, but you're asking me. And with that being said, Ring IQ's 2020 Prospect of the Year, a guy who's very close to crossing over into contender status, but isn't quite there yet, just so happens to be Golden Boy Promotions own Virgil Ortiz. Virgil Ortiz, who's 16-0 with 16 KOs. He's got a 100% knockout percentage. He only managed to get out there once this year, and that's why I still kind of classify him as a prospect. I gather that, if Virgil would have got to get out there under normal circumstances, if it wasn't COVID times, I think he would have already crossed over into contender status. But as it stands, he still is kind of a prospect. He is. But he's got the names of Brad Solomon, Samuel Vargas, Javier Orozco, El Maestro, Mauricio Herrera. This is a kid who shows a lot of promise, very young, and he's just getting started. He hasn't even peaked yet, this kid, all right? He is Ring IQ's 2020 Prospect of the Year, someone to watch out for in 2021. By that time, I think he will be a full-fledged contender. That takes care of our 2 Prospects of the Year, Melissa Odessa, Virgil Ortiz. Congratulations to them. We move on to the next category, Ring IQ's Most Improved Fighter of the Year. We're going to start it off with our Most Improved Female Fighter of the Year. This is a fighter that suffered 3 professional losses in their career before it all really came together for her very recently this year, when she took on the reigning WBC Bantamweight champion. Up until that point, for the most part, this fighter's level of competition could be described as a bit pedestrian. up until that recent performance, where she showed the improvements that won her this award. I'm talking about Mexico's own Juliana Luna, the reigning WBC bantamweight champion. The performance that she put on against Bobby Juarez, it was awe-inspiring, is what it was. It was effective, it was polished, it was clean. You know, she beat Bobby so fucking bad that Bobby actually thought that Juliana had loaded her gloves. That's how bad she beat her. But she beat her with clean boxing. And it all really came together this year for Juliana Luna, who emerges as a major player in the bantamweight division. Congratulations to her. We then move on to our most improved men's boxer of 2020 this year. And you know, this award goes to a guy who regularly gets counted out. A guy who's more often than not labeled the underdog in a fight, you understand. This guy got out there 2 times this year, in 2 fights that he was favored to lose. And I'll tell you what he didn't do. He didn't fucking lose. No, he fucking won. We're talking about Long Island's own Joe Smith Jr. You want to talk about most improved? You want to talk about that? You want to talk about most improved fighter of the year? Let me tell you something, all right? This guy got out there against Jesse Hart, the fight he was favored to lose. He gives Jesse Hart the beating of his life, is what he does. He gives Jesse Hart a worse beating than the beating that Jesse got at the hands of Zurdo Ramirez at 168 pounds, the then WBO champion. Okay, Joe gets out there one more time before the year is out. He gets out there against the later Alvarez, and he beats this guy from pillar to post, doubles up the jab, applies educated pressure on that guy. Joe Smith Jr. is more than just a good chin and a hard right hand. This guy has vastly improved, so much so that he is on the cusp of becoming a full-fledged world champion. Joe Smith Jr. and Juliana Luna are the recipients of Ring IQ's 2020 Most Improved Fighter of the Year award. Congratulations to them. We then come to our next category, Trainer of the Year. Both women's categories. I think the trainer 2020 that really deserves Trainer of the Year for the work that they've done this year, and you know, just up until this point, but this year in particular, this is an annual award, after all, would have to be Chicagoan Rick Ramos, who trained Jessica McCaskill, who kept her on track, kept her ready for what opportunities may lie in wait, even during COVID times. I've watched this fighter, this trainer's work several years now, and what he's managed to do with Jessica, who doesn't even have a lot of professional fights, you know, taking her to that Katie Taylor fight, bouncing back from that loss, becoming a champion, subsequently a unified champion, to an undisputed champion here today. I have to say that the Women's Trainer of the Year award for the year of 2020, it has to go to Rick Ramos. There's no doubt in my mind. No doubt in my mind. The award for Men's Trainer of the Year wasn't a hard decision to come to, given what took place in 2020. It has to go to Derek James. It has to go to Derek James, who has 2 unified champions under his wing. Jermell Charlo, who's just 1 belt away from becoming the junior middleweight division's undisputed champion, and Errol Spence Jr., who made his ring return this year against Danny Garcia and looked the part. Derek James' work with both of these fighters, you know, it deserves a spotlight. It deserves the accolades, the praise. We just put the politics aside. We put all that, your side of the street, my side of the street stuff. If we just put that aside and focus on the nuts and bolts of it, you know that Jermell Charlo has the most complete resume in the 154-pound division. And even though we're all a little angry at Errol Spence Jr. because that Crawford fight isn't happening, you know, Errol is a good fighter for what it's worth, and I think Derek James has a little something to do with that. Derek James is our Men's Trainer of the Year for 2020. Ring IQ's award for Promoter of the Year in the year of 2020. That has to go to our buddy, your friend and mine, Eddie fucking Heine. Eddie Heine is responsible for this year's ring return of Anthony Joshua, this year's ring return of Canelo Alvarez, all right? The Fight Camp Series, which kept most of us company during the shutdown, gave us some quality matches, some quality fights to watch. What he's doing with the guys, what he's doing with the girls, this guy's easily 2020's promoter of the year. 2 million views for Katie Taylor's last outing, you understand. A card that featured Terry Harper in action against Katarina Sanders. A card that featured Rachel Ball in action against Jorgelina Guanini in a card that featured Katie Taylor versus Miriam Gutierrez. He managed to get that to a point where 2 million fight fans tuned in to watch that fight. What this guy's doing for the sport, he's taking it to new places for the guys, for the girls, for everybody, for me and you. And he is easily 2020's promoter ready.
When it comes to our next category, I'm sure you're all gonna like this one. Knockout!
Right. We all know that everyone from the hardcore boxing fan to the casual observer loves themselves a good knockout. And we had quite a few this year, we really did. But, I'm going to start this off. The knockout of the year. And there were a few that caught my eye. One or two. The one that caught my eye the most, and this was just based on purely aesthetic value. How I felt when I saw the knockout. Was it satisfying? Was I satisfied as a consumer, as a paid customer? I have to say I was. That would have to be Shannon Courtenay's knockout over Dorita Norway. It took place on the undercard of Saunders versus Murray, the super middleweight title fight. It was a 7th round TKO. And what was a very entertaining, albeit scrappy fight, Shannon Courtenay very quickly asserted herself with her punch placement, that she was the better boxer out of the two boxers in the fight, Both girls were very game, both girls, they ain't afraid to let their hands go. They weren't afraid to let their hands go. But Shannon did prove to be the more effective puncher, and off a big right hand, she lifted Dorita Norek off her feet, swept her up right from under. This really was one of the more satisfying knockouts that took place this year. That Shanicia Estrada versus Miranda Atkins knockout, that also came to mind. But I have to say that I was a little bit more satisfied by this. The hesitation from Miranda, it was satisfying, yeah, but I felt bad for that kid. Whereas in this fight with Dorita and Shannon, Dorita had it coming. You want to go stand in front of Shannon, that's what you're going to get. We then come to the men's category. And, the guys, they really did give us a lot to choose from. They did. For knockout of the year, I think Tyson Fury kicked off the year with one of the more significant knockouts. That is, stoppages, I should say. Deontay Wilder's corner throwing the towel. The Ivan Baranchyk versus Jose Zapata fight. That's a great knockout for Jose. Joe Smith Jr. knocking out Aleta Alvarez. I can go on. There were a lot of knockouts this year. A lot of really good knockouts, But ultimately, the knockout that left me most in awe, I just didn't see it coming, Caught me by surprise. Caught the guy that got knocked out by surprise, too. Would have to be Alexander Povetkin's knockout of Billy, I have to say. In a fight where Alexander was clearly on his way to losing, you understand? He turned it all around off one shot, one uppercut that Dillian Whyte just didn't brace himself for. He didn't see the punch coming, and it took him out. And I think a lot of us were shocked by that knockout. That is Ring IQ's 2020 knockout of the year. I'll tell you, not since the last outing of Pacquiao and Marquez was I that surprised by a knockout, and it was a violent knockout. Dillian was out before he actually hit the ground. It was one of those knockouts. I have to say that really is the way he has ended it, as far as I'm concerned, for knockout of the year. We're now closing in on Ring IQ's 2020 Women's Fight of the Year. We got a lot of good matchups this year. We did. Rachel Ball versus Shannon Courtenay. The second installment of Taylor versus Persoon. McCaskill versus Breakus. But ultimately, my fight of the year would have to be the super featherweight contest between Natasha Jonas and the reigning champion Terry Harper. A fight that was just as entertaining as the aforementioned fights, but there was more seesaw action, more back and forth, harder rounds to call. Ahead of the fight, most people treated the fight as if it was a foregone conclusion that Terry Harper was going to make it past Natasha Jonas. They underestimated Ms. Great Britain. And I think that's what did it for me. I warned that perhaps people were writing off Natasha's chances ahead of the fight. And man, did she surprise everyone, myself included. It was an even better fight than what I expected. And I have to say, it yielded the most pleasing aesthetic out of all the women's fights this year. Great entertainment value, back and forth action. I want to see a sequel. Harper versus Jonas is Ring IQ's 2020 Women's Fight of the Year. When it comes to the men's fights, there really were a lot of great fights, just like there were for guys, But ultimately, it came down to a couple of fights. Baranchyk versus Zapata was in there, and that was a great fight. Great entertainment value. Real old school stuff, real slobberknocker. But the fight that did it for me wasn't Baranchyk versus Zapata. It was Estrada versus Quadros. That's right. Just as much back and forth action as Baranchyk and Zapata, but fought at a higher level. That's Ring IQ's 2020 Fight of the Year. Had knockdowns, back and forth action, ebbs and flows, and skill, grit. That definitely took a take for me as far as Fights of the Year this year, 2020. We then come to our last category, this inaugural Ring IQ End of the Year Awards Fighter of the Year. When it comes to the Women's Fighter of the Year, a lot of thought went into this. A lot of people, they gave it to Katie Taylor. It's understandable why they might have done that. Though myself, I chose to go in another direction because there's one fighter that racked up a win this year, one female fighter that racked up a win, that you can't compare it to anything because it's bigger than everything else that happened this year. No female fighter this year racked up a win like the win that this female fighter racked up. Moved up in weight for this fight and effectively became the welterweight division's undisputed champion. Ring IQ's Women's Fighter of the Year is Chicagoan Jessica McCaskill. You tell me who racked up a win bigger than the one she racked up over Cecilia Brækhus, effectively becoming an undisputed champion after having already been a unified champion in a different weight class. Jessica McCaskill is Ring IQ's 2020 Fighter of the Year. Comes to the Men's Fighter of the Year. A very similar thought process went into that. Ring Magazine chose to give it to two fighters, Tyson Fury and Teofimo Lopez, but I think that was rather indecisive of them because comparatively, Deontay Wilder was not to the heavyweight division what Vasyl Lomachenko was to the lightweight division and the sport of boxing. This guy was considered by many as the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the sport. I mean, he was. Maybe not by me or you, but by a lot of people. And young Teofimo Lopez decided to take the bull by the horns, take this guy on, and not only did he take him on, he won the fight. He won the fight that he was favored to lose, effectively becoming the lightweight division unified champion. It's for this reason that young Teofimo Lopez is Ring IQ's 2020 Men's Fighter of the Year. Because no victory like his victory compares. With that, we cap off our inaugural Ring IQ End of the Year Awards. Congratulations to all the recipients, and may 2021 be just as bright and just as productive as 2020 was for these fighters.